Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Scott Stedman podcast. I hope you are having a wonderful weekend so far as we are getting closer. Actually, by the time this episode is up, we are going to be past Labor Day, so we will be in September. And hopefully by this point, the weather will be starting to get a little cooler than it has
Oh, I hope
been.
so.
Well, even then, like we've been working on our AC units and our building superintendent's been really working and trying to like redo the wiring and everything else. Because if we were to hire somebody, they're going to charge like almost like $45 an hour. And I'm thinking, yikes, like, no, thank you. So he's been doing it. And with all that being said, like, I have not had AC in my office. And luckily, it's not too bad. It's only 79 degrees in my office. But sometimes it can.
Have, but you have internet.
I do have internet. My internet's been acting weird at the house, so that's why I'm sweating profusely over here to do this podcast with my co-host Micah Curry. Micah, how are you doing?
Man, I'm good. I was talking to my mother-in-law the other day on the phone, and I was like, I can't remember a summer in Ohio where we just had like an entire summer of straight days of the 90s, like temperature-wise. Like it
Yeah,
has just been literally 90 degrees every single day this summer.
yeah.
And if it hasn't been 90, it's been pretty close, like 89, 88, something like that. But
Hmm.
like, I can't, can you remember a summer?
No, I don't. I can't remember a summer at all that was this hot. Like it's something.
Yeah.
It
So
it's something. Like
our lawn guy that comes and cuts our grass, he's like, "Hey, do you need your grass cut this week?" And I look out the back window, and I was like, "Man, my backyard is fried. There is you would get nothing if you cut
well,
the grass."
at least the one benefit is we'll have at least one day a week where we'll just get a torrential downpour of rain. It'll just like drop on us for like an hour and then it's done. So I haven't had like burnt grass like I had last year. Like my grass, I'm like, man, my grass is all brown. I don't think I'm ever going to recover from this.
Although the last couple of years in Southwest Ohio and I guess Ohio in general, um, there's been a lot of nice. We've had really nice fall, like a really
Hmm.
nice fall, where the temperature has been reasonable. You could have your windows open. You could still wear shorts, but you could wear like a quarter zip. Like it's just, you know, I really hope that it's like this fall coming up. I'm not going to hold my breath until it actually happens. Um, but then, Lord only knows what the winter's going to do because the last couple of years it's been like we get one or two snowstorms and that's it. So, um, which I don't care because I'm not
Yeah.
a big. But anyway, yeah, I'm ready for the fall, and I'm ready for to go to like festivals and ready to go to you know things that they where they sell like caramel apples and apple butter,
And apple cider and all that fun stuff.
cider, just you know enjoy the season for what it is. So
Yeah, absolutely. So today we're going to be kind of changing up our gears a little bit. Last couple of weeks have been talking about leadership stuff, and even though this kind of still fits in leadership, but more about branding and changes and leadership positions. But today we're going to be talking about the worship stage, and kind of what that means and how that has changed and evolved for the better or for worse. Um, and Micah, you talked about how before we got on the show when we were talking about this idea about how you saw a video where they're talking about the evolution of the worship stage, how before it used to be a place where there is a reverence to it, a place where this is a this is a place where a prestigious place to help guide people to find God, to grow in their faith, to be able to open up their hearts for worship, to praising God. And it almost seems like within our own modern context now, the stage has kind of been a thing that you kind of graduate from to get on bigger stages, to get on bigger platforms. It's not necessarily about the people who are coming, but it's kind of more about elevating one's personal career for those who have the privilege to be on that stage, whether that's to lead worship or to present the word, etc.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting if you look back at um, the early 2000s and you think of guys like Michael W. Smith and uh, Third Day and Jars of Clay and Paul Baloche and
Mm,
Chris Tomlin and all these guys that were um, really just making a name for themselves, both with songwriting, but in their local churches. It's changed quite a bit in 20 years because now it's almost like you got your bigger churches, your Bethels, your Jesus cultures, your elevations, your um, your uh, large churches that you know seem to um, just keep growing. And I and something that I've noticed too is that like because there's such large churches, your Bethel, we'll just say Bethel and Elevation for the illustration of this context, but like you know the they have so many they have so much depth of players and worship leaders and musicians and all the tech and sound, lighting and audio and engineering and all the things that go into making a Sunday morning experience work. That a lot of times these groups like Elevation and Bethel, they're taking their stuff on the road and they're playing live in venues all over the country. They're not playing in churches; they're playing in concert venues.
hmm
Um, and they're, I think we did a podcast a year or two ago about how stupid Elevation's concert tickets were. I think it was Elevation. Um, but the cost of how much the tickets were going to be to go see
Yeah.
Elevation Church, uh, when you could drive 7 hours to Charlotte and stand in line and go to church on Sunday.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it's just it's a vastly different world now. I think back in the early 2000s, those guys were writing songs. They were trying to make a name for themselves. They were trying to, and I think that they had integrity
hmm
in what they were doing, and I think that they were on the right track. And Paul Baloche is one of my favorites.
hmm
I met Paul um, several years ago, and I've never met a more humble person. But you know, he he would always talk about how he was the worship pastor of this small 300 people church in the middle of Texas and would, essentially they had metal folding chairs and they didn't have the lights and the smoke and all those things. But he actually went into business for himself because he came up with, well, the record label was Integrity Music, but he also came up with lead worship, which he would make DVDs, he would make instructional videos on how to play guitar and worship and music theory and all the things that would be helpful to those who may not have the experience in the worship arena that others that have had that training do. Um, but then if you fast forward 20 years, it feels more like a concert and they're just, you know, Elevation and Bethel and granted I like their music. I don't dislike their music at all. But they're cranking out new albums every year. And so it's like what's the next new song? What's the next new hit? What's the next new, song that every church is going to want to play?
hmm
And it's just become this, I don't know, huge platform it's kind of grown into something that I never imagined that it would.
Yeah, like it's interesting just the evolution because I think about where I go to school at Ashland, Miller Chapel. And one of the ways Miller Chapel is designed, it's designed without a stage. Like, I mean, obviously there's a big open area where someone speaks, but the mentality of the design and not to put like a platform or anything up on this up front is the kind of hit that is the kind of hit the idea that anybody can come and proclaim the word, that no one's better than anyone else. It's like we're all kind of in community, and that was kind of the design of it. And I think even with churches when I was growing up and I would go to church, those stages were kind of places where you were in a position, and it was kind of even pointed out very strongly that this is not a stage for performance. This is a stage for worship. So like when I was a teenager and we would do our youth services on Sunday morning, that was kind of a big thing. Like, hey, when you're going up there, it's not about you. It's not it's not the Scott Stedman show. It's not about the teen worship band being all wild and playing like heavy music or whatnot. Um, it's about worship, and it's about putting our focus, and God is going to be our focus. And it's almost like there's this shift where it's not necessarily, and I don't think like pastors who are on a bigger stage who have TV deals and or have a really good market social media team to really put their stuff out there so that millions of people can watch their services. I don't necessarily think that somebody goes into that position and thinks, man, I want to make a name for myself. Um, I want it to be about God and Jesus. And it just so happens that you're at a place where things are starting to get big, things are starting to become very, more people are responding to the word, and you're just kind of like growing in a sense, whether it's organically or you just have a good business sense on how to grow a nonprofit organization to an enterprise. Um, but I think when you go up there, and here's the kind of thing I think preachers and sneakers kind of exploits this a little bit, where okay, you're a pastor, you're going up there, you're here to speak the word, but yet you're wearing a $2,000 jacket, wearing about $1,000 shoes, your belt's about $500. And then you're talking to people and you're saying, hey, we got to give money to the poor in our community. When just by your simple presence, you already have thousands of dollars on your body already. And I think that's kind of where people can get critical a little bit about all that um, because it's like, well, is it really about God or is it about fame? Is it about the money? Is it about wealth? And I can't really like make a criticism to Elevation because I do have a couple of people who I know who work at Elevation, like some of their satellite campuses. And just a few conversations I have with my buddy, he will say like, "Hey, here's kind of what we're doing. And even though you could look at Preachers and Sneakers and see Stephen Furtick wearing you know $5,000 shoes, but we're also giving um, almost $1 million, millions and millions of dollars to charities. We're pouring it and we're investing it in here, and we're investing it in overseas missions. We're investing it in our community in North Carolina. We have some of that money where we're investing it in Roanoke, Virginia, where we have our satellite campus. So with all that being said, you kind of get to that point where you go, oh, it kind of puts a bigger perspective on things. And I think the platform in itself can become can kind of become that dual-edged sword in some ways. It can be a tool to use to really cut through down the walls, to break the change, to lower people's like guards, to allow the Holy Spirit and the Word of God to really empower people and to change lives. At the same time, if left unchecked, it can also be a place where we're now building up about a brand, a business. There's a difference between, you know, I mean, even well, let me go back. There's an episode. I think I might have sent you like a teaser of it. That there's a lady who was a part of Maverick City Music, and she had a conversation on Lecrae's podcast, The Deep End, and they were talking a little bit about how Maverick City was featured on Glorilla's album and kind of the controversy that started because Gorilla's album, that album that dropped, a lot of swear words, lots of sexually explicit things, except for the song that has Maverick City. That's like the only one that didn't have the explicit filter on it. But she even talked about, there's Maverick City as a business, as a brand. And I think, it's very easy for the stage to talk about, okay, we're not going to be promoting the brand. There's Bethel music that is a worship music that leads worship every Sunday. And then there's Bethel Worship Music, the brand that gets the revenue from the CCLI for other churches who are doing it. They're putting out their CDs, doing a Bethel world tour, going around and charging ticket prices to do these big worship concerts. And I think in those aspects, you have to almost kind of be careful because it can really start to distort the mission and the ministry that you're doing, um, because now it's not about, well, we're doing this because we care about people, want people to know Jesus, worship God, and maybe that might be what you say through the microphone and you tell people, but deep down internally it's like, man, I can't wait to, you know get my second house or to get my vacation home out in on the coast or whatever the case may be, because then it becomes a more financial and building up your own kingdom while you're trying to also build up the kingdom of God as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, to think that some of these churches are so big that they make so much money that they can pay their staff crazy, crazy amounts of money. And, you know, just to think about buying a house on the beach and, on the West Coast or whatever, and just being able to not have to worry about money ever again, is kind of wild. And, not only does Stephen Furtick have his name on every Elevation song that's ever been written, he gets profit from that. He gets paid from the church, and he has all these books that he's written. So there's like he gets profit from the books that he's
And
written.
even any speaking engagements he goes to do too, he gets paid for that as well.
Yeah. So it's wild. It's absolutely wild. Um, yeah, I I don't much to add. I mean, like it's just interesting to me that you know I was thinking a lot about the obviously the worship piece, but also the pastor piece, the senior pastor piece, where are you using the church that you're in to get out of that church to get to a bigger church? Are you um, truly unhappy where you are in order to get somewhere bigger and better? Um, but I also see a lot of folks like we're not picking on the Church of God because we agreed not to before we hit record. But there's not a lot of big Church of Gods, right? Like there's just not. And I mean, there's a handful. And so a lot of friends that I have, especially in the worship world, they're going to other churches because they can make more money. They're larger churches and they're gonna have more um say in what they do. And Um, it's just crazy. And then like the same thing with like, senior pastors, like I think Jeanette Flynn told me this, the average stay of a pastor in the Church of God is 18 months.
Yeah,
And so um that's not even 2 years, Scott.
yeah,
And so are these people just leaving ministry, or are they going to bigger churches? Are they taking bigger assignments because
yeah,
of, you know, the small
yeah.
small group mentality? And we could go down that rabbit hole as well, but I'm not going to do that today.
Well, I
Um,
mean, I think in some ways it can be a lot of like, my first position was a bivocational position. I was there for 3 years. Um, and the only reason why I left there was because Laura was pregnant and we wanted to have kids. And even though our goal was to, our goal was to like really help this church turn it around so it can start being more invested in the community, start getting more people. Um, you know, eventually, more people means the church isn't going into the red, which means that if we're always in the black, then, you know, we can fund more ministries. And then the other thing, which was never really a big thing for me, was that, I can get a raise. Or I can maybe, hopefully, I don't have to be a bivocational, but I can be full time. Not expecting to be rich, not expecting to have a book deal or TV rights or anything, just to go from bivocational. So once, eventually when Laura and I decided we were going to have kids, and it's like, well, we can't, this isn't going to help us. Then, we can't care for a kid with me working bivocational, me working two other jobs, and Laura driving up to Cleveland, which was an hour and a half commute one way, and back doing law stuff. So, we found a full time position. We moved to Virginia. That was great until it wasn't. And now we're here and I'm making less than what I did in Virginia, but at the same time, like we're content. And I think that's kind of the goal too, is I think the good attitude to have is, are you content with where you're at, with the ministry you're doing, and and just kind of, are you content with your needs, where your needs are right now? And I would say, if you are, then you don't need to go bigger, because going bigger means you're going more responsibility. There's more stuff. And yeah, maybe the bigger paycheck might be nice at first, but then eventually it's going to come crashing down. And we've seen, especially since, the mega churches have kind of become a really big thing, or have become more aware, like in the late 90s, 2000s, at least more mainstream, I guess. But now you see people who were worship leaders around that time who were making buku money. They're no longer working in ministry, and they talk about the horrors of working in a mega church. And, even like with the fall of Hillsong, and even though there's been a lot of different documentaries, and there's been one where Carl Wentz kind of gets candid and he talks a little bit about his view, his shortcomings. Some of it was kind of his thing, some of it was kind of like a cultural thing of like things that you should do, and it ended up wrecking him. And I think, we're just, and then I mean, there's other like worship leaders who are part of bigger churches who kind of walked away and said, yeah, I mean, I'm leading worship in a small church now, because even though I had a good salary and, I could afford a home and all this stuff, like I was miserable, because it just felt like it wasn't necessarily about leading people to God. It was about putting on a show and putting on a performance. And I just felt uncomfortable with that. So I think, when we kind of get to a point where we can be content with where we are, then I believe that's when God's going to really meet us in a way where we're going to kind of be sustained in his love, and be wise and be guided, so that we're not burning out, we're not stressing out, and we're not just constantly kind of going through the motions, where now it's about me trying to look a certain part or to be a certain part up on stage, where I could just humbly be myself and speak from the word and speak from how the word shapes me and how it can shape others.
Yeah. don't know if you read the book Simple Church, but it's like I I think that simple is best,
Hmm.
and sometimes we complicate ministry.
Yeah.
And if you want to go and try and make more money, God bless you. But I've been there and done that. It's not fun.
Yeah. It's not fun at all. Well, friends, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and let me know what you think. If you're someone who is a pastor or you're somebody who's a leader up on the worship stage, like, want to hear your thoughts. Is this a struggle for you as your church gets bigger? Are you someone who is content where you are? You're someone who maybe in it, I mean, we love honesty here on the Scott Stedman podcast. So maybe you're someone who's just seeing like the stage as just a leaping pad to get on bigger stages, to get on brighter lights. So we would like to hear those stories as well, friends. So thank you so much for listening. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll be back on to another episode.
Thank you for
Take
listening to the Scott
care.
Stedman Podcast. The Scott Stedman Podcast is made possible by support from our listeners. We thank listeners like Patty and Scott, whose support goes to this podcast's continual growth and maintenance. If you want to support this podcast, you can do so in a number of ways. First, feel free to give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed this episode and share it with your friends. If you'd like to financially support the Scott Stedman Podcast, you can go to the website ko-fi.com/the Scott Stedman Podcast. That website again is ko-fi.com/the Scott Stedman Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.